But yesterday's and today's and tomorrow's gospel readings have a lot of this sort of somewhat dense theology at times. But this particular passage includes a simple quote from Jesus that we hear all the time, so much so that it's really sort of become a cliche. And when something becomes a cliche, sometimes it's hard always to remember just what it actually means. Fortunately for us, Jesus gives us some context to help us understand it. Now, what is this cliche? It is that the truth will set you free. We hear that a lot in a lot of contexts. Jesus is explaining, however, that to understand what it means that the truth is what sets us free, he contrasts it, of course, with what sin does. And he tells us that it is sin that enslaves us. And while the allure of sin usually is presented in some fashion before us as, I can do whatever I please, and that means I am truly free, the problem with that premise is that we were made to be with God in heaven. That is our very nature. Still, because of free will, we must choose to seek God and what he offers us in heaven. So in order to be best disposed to make that choice for God, we must be as free as possible to do so. And the only way to be truly free is to be aware of the truth as much as possible. Satan, we know him to be the father of lies, of course. He always looks to deceive us into believing that whatever our baser appetites desires is really what we want, and if we just open our minds to whatever it is our hearts just plain want no matter what, then we can do whatever we want. But sin always enslaves, as Jesus tells us. Sin enslaves us so much that it distorts our perception of both truth and falsehood, of good and bad. I know I've said it before, but the most insidious component of a life of sin is how it causes one to perceive bad as good and therefore accordingly to perceive good as bad. Sometimes that takes time for that type of corroded and corrupted perception, misperception to take root. But once it does, it becomes almost impossible, to break free. And so how could one really be more a slave than to believe that? Think of people who are operating under any type of a delusion. They think they're free, but in fact they're trapped by their own misunderstanding. A simple example, right? Sailors who believed that the world was flat, so they didn't think it was safe to sail too far west from Portugal because they'd fall off the edge. That might sound a little silly or, again, a little simple, but it could be any falsehood. Lies and misunderstanding of truth always make us less free because they curtail our potential to make the best possible choices. The Jews with whom Jesus was conversing that day believed that being descended from Abraham gave them the truth. Jesus was pointing out that if they truly lived as sons of Abraham, they would open their eyes to truth even when they didn't fully understand it, because that truth came from God. That's what Abraham had done when he placed his perfect faith and trust in God's promises. There's no way that a man in his 80s or 90s, as Abraham was when he left home, could possibly have understood everything God was telling him about being the father of a nation of innumerable folks. No way Abraham could have understood that that nation is us. But he trusted completely in God all the same. The Jews in the gospel account that through bloodlines, they were that's all that matters. But Jesus explained to them that behavior is what matters most of all. Seeing the truth, which is always from God, accepting it, even when it might seem counterintuitive, and then trusting fully in that truth because it comes from God. That's what Jesus' disciples did. It's not that the disciples were sinless, but ultimately they trusted in the truth and they accepted it. And that's what led them to become saints. They were truly free to be who they were made to be because they believed in the truth. We too are all called to be saints. And so we all need the truth to be able to seek it and attain it. And Jesus Christ truly is the truth, the life, and the way. By following Jesus Christ, the truth, that is how we will all become truly free.